Going to look at now is another type of transportation that has been important, and I think everyone on the panel would agree that we're excited to continue to think about a future importance of the trolley trail. So what a multimodal trail is doing for the area. I'm going to take a moment to just allow all of our panelists to introduce themselves. You have a packet on the table that'll tell you a little bit more about everyone, but I think in their own words, they'll be able to tell you about themselves. I'm moderating today. My name's Allie O'Neill, and I've had the pleasure of working in this community for nearly a decade now in a number of different capacities, and I join you here today as a part of the Gateway Arts District Management team and consortium who are thrilled to bring this amazing group together to talk about a trail that is so strong and powerful, and we may even see more. So I think, yeah please. Sure.
Hey folks, I'm Elliott Caldwell. I'm the Virginia and DC manager for the East Coast Greenway Alliance. I'm also sort of here wearing the hat as a sort of steering committee member for the Capitol Trails Coalition, which is a project of the Washington Area Bicycle Association. So work on trail development. If you read my bio, it sounds like I'm from Georgia because I worked in Georgia and all my post-secondary education was in Georgia. But I'm actually born and raised in DC. I've lived in Washington, DC pretty much most of my life, the vast majority of my life. So, but a lot of my work day to day is actually in DC and then in Virginia. But I do a lot of work in Prince George's County as well, because for the East Coast Greenway Alliance, the person that works in Maryland is based in Philly. So I live just about 2 miles away in Northeast DC, and Prince George's County is significantly closer than Philadelphia. So I'm lucky to work with a lot of the great partners here in Prince George's County.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Evan Dame. I'm a board member of the Gateway Community Development Corporation, as well as the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center, and a lifelong resident of North Brentwood, so I'm well aware of the history. And actually, that was my mother that spoke earlier, and so we're very much invested here today. Thank you.
I'm Bob Patten. I'm the Trail Development Program Manager at the Department of Parks and Recreation for Prince George's County, part of M-NCPPC. My colleague Sean is here, and our Planning Board Chair Peter Shapiro is here, and maybe others associated to the commission here. I moved here in 1992 and have loved learning about all the history and loved that presentation. That was really helpful.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tracey Douglas. I am the city administrator for the City of Hyattsville. And I imagine that many of you here predate me in terms of the Trolley Trail, or what it was like prior to this great new trail that we now have in Hyattsville that's making a huge difference in this community. I do want to just acknowledge that my deputy city administrator is here, Laura Reams, and our director of economic development is in the back, our interim director back there. That's Jeff Ulisse. Jonathan Alexander is here, and I think that's probably it from my staff. So I did just want to acknowledge that the staff came out as well. A few of them have been here at the start of our the new trolley trail here in Hyattsville. Not the start of the new one. Yeah. So yeah, we're really excited, and I look forward to talking about all the great things that this trail has, the extension has done for our city.
All right, so I think the way that we're going to start this panel is to, again, ground ourselves in the history. How did we get here? We are at the furthest extension point, but there's been a lot of work that's gotten us here. And so we have, Bob, I'm going to ask you first to kind of, how do we get here? How did this start? What brought us here? And if you don't mind to reflect, are there any key moments, either in the advocacy or things in hindsight that you saw as really important?
Yes. I've done a little research. I'm suspecting that there's a person in the back who is really responsible for getting this off the ground. Eric, is that the case? Because I don't know the history in College Park. Okay. So So I've done a little research, but there may be people who can elaborate on just some of the outline as I go through it quickly. I want to let you know, I also, when I first moved here, I got involved at the Rails to Trails Conservancy, working there and learning about the conversion of railroads and trolley lines around the country into bike and pedestrian trails. And that evolved into becoming a professional in the field. So that's a little of my background. I've had some involvement in this project as a professional and now working for the Park and Planning Commission. But I wasn't around. Well, I was around, but I didn't know the details of the beginnings of things. So I believe the beginnings of the planning and the thinking and the recognizing that there was an opportunity happened in the 1990s. Is that right, Eric? That culminated in the starting of construction of the trail, and the first section of the trail that was opened, according to Steve Halpern, who I interviewed, who worked for the City of College Park, opened in 2000. And it was the Berwyn neighborhood section from Greenbelt Road to Berwyn Road. So that happened in 2000 with the planning for that happening before. It took 23 years to get to here today. And it took 16 at least discrete parts of constructing pieces of this trail. And Eric talked to us about how the trains were built in pieces. And I think the way they built the trains in pieces is that the next piece connected to the prior piece, and then they kept going in order and to get somewhere. But when we turned these old rail lines into trails, we didn't do it in such a logical fashion. So it started up there at the Berwyn neighborhood. In 2001, the section opened near Pierce and Lakewood Park, from College Park Community Center to what was then, Campus Drive was then called the Piney Branch Parkway. Paint Branch Parkway, right. Thank you. I got my P parkways mixed up. So that was a section where the city and the Park and Planning Commission, the Planning Commission owned some of the property, the city had control of some of the property. So that was the next piece. But there was a gap there between the first piece. And then in 2007, with a big gap of years, the Calvert Hills section got done. And I imagine that Eric and others in Calvert Hills, it took a lot of pushing and shoving between 2001 to 2007 to get that next piece. Then in 2008, I fortunately got a chance to be involved as a professional, and the Park and Planning Commission hired a tool design group to develop a plan for completion of the rest of the trail. And, well, the rest of the trail as it was envisioned down to this area. But, you know, as we learned, there were trolley alignments going north and going south from here. So this one kind of grew out of the middle. So in 2012, the Calvert Hills, the northern section, the Calvert Hills neighborhood was built. And so that went from Calvert Road back up to the Paint Branch Parkway. And yeah, Old Town College Park. And so that started to create a little connectivity in that core area in College Park. And then in 2013, and this is the beginning of a series of actions, and I think Eric again was involved in the foresight here with change in development patterns. So this is where we come into history again, in that development, commercial, neighborhood, business, residential development drove the trolley line development process in the 1800s and early 1900s. And that same thing drove the development of the trail in our area. So 2013, the Berwyn neighborhood coming down to the Lakewood Park area was finished. And a section in the Arts District in Hyattsville was started and built by the Arts District development firm EYA. And then in 2014, another section in downtown Hyattsville from the Arts District down here to Farragut Street was put together. In 2015, the developer of the Riverdale Park Station area completed the southern section in that development. 2016, the northern section in that development was partially done. In 2017, the section in the town of Riverdale from the development area down to the town center was developed. Excuse me, I got that a little mixed up. In Riverdale, they started with the section that came from the Arts District and the EYA development going north up to the town center in Riverdale. And then they put together the little link between College Park and Riverdale near Albion Road. And then also a momentous thing, and maybe Eric will tell the story of how the wall finally came down and a more direct link for crossing Paint Branch Parkway happened at what was now Campus Drive. That was a real jig jog for quite some time. So in 2020, the section along Rhode Island Avenue north of Greenbelt Road started to pick up steam. Now that's a section that doesn't have an off-road trail but is developing a protected bikeway. And the City of College Park and the Department of Public Works exchanged property, and the city got control and started the process of making safer bike and pedestrian accommodations on that section of the old trolley line. And that's kind of still going, underway, piece by piece, continued change. In 2022, in the Riverdale Park Station development, they finally built the last section there to get rid of a lot of detour activity near Van Buren Street. And then in 2023, the section opened up in what we call the Hyattsville extension from Farragut down to Armentrout. That's a section that I had a really good time being involved with. It was a section that would not have gotten done without key state elected officials being involved in pushing the State Highway Administration. That section represents a first in, I believe, the whole state of Maryland. For the State Highway Administration, they did a study and they agreed to do what's called a road diet. They eliminated a car lane in order to create space for biking and walking from Armentrout Drive up to Farragut Street. That was pretty radical, and it took them a long time to get around to actually completing that whole thing, and it took a lot of pushing and shoving. The other thing is Armentrout Drive right out here, you don't find an intersection like that anywhere else in the state of Maryland. I don't know if they've done any in Baltimore, but a bicycle signal, green markings to show separate crossings for bikes and pedestrians. Incidentally, that was done because pedestrians include people who have disabilities, and they had to have the pedestrian pathway meet the criteria for designing for people with disabilities. So that brings us to today. When we talked about the extension as the last piece of the Trolley Trail, in the back of my mind, I was like, when I first moved here, I lived in Mount Rainier. I think there's going to be a desire to keep it going, and in fact, there is.
Well, Bob, thank you so much. And what you highlighted really, I think, is that it takes so many. I mean, we heard, and Eric Olson, thank you for joining us today. It takes elected officials. It takes all of our representatives. It takes neighbors like you. It takes city representation. And so that coalition really was important in being able to do something that requires a lot of coordination. And so we're here now. We're at the end of the existing line and the start of the new line. But something I'd love to talk a little bit more about, and I think Tracey can help us with this, is that the Trolley Trail's been in Hyattsville for a while now. It's been in the Arts District there. And we're actually seeing the city investing in a new trailhead park. So it seems as though there's some value that is perceived locally about this. And Tracey, I was hoping that you could speak to us about the trail, how it's impacted the Arts District, and have you heard from businesses or any other thoughts with neighbors about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Excuse me. Our businesses are really excited. It has made a huge difference in Hyattsville, as I said when we first began. I appreciate you, Bob, for giving a little of the history about this, because when I arrived here in 2014, our council members, this was a huge legislative priority for them. Getting this trail done was probably the most important thing that they were discussing because of pedestrian safety, the accidents and things that were happening out there. Not only accidents, but near accidents, because near accidents aren't always reported. But many of you who are using the trails, you see some of the impact of just having to cross the street, walk the bikes along what is considered a highway. I mean, it's a major road going through the city. And so there was no excuse that there was this gap, but of course you have to have funding to be able to make that happen. So a lot of people worked hard to get that done. A lot of our staff, a lot of the council members, a lot of our delegates, Senator Pinsky, Senator Augustine asked me a little bit about that. There were just quite a few people that just worked together. Of course, WABA, it was a coalition of people that probably sat in a room just like this and said, this is not safe, we need to do something. So we recognize that having this trail also brings opportunities to our small businesses. And I think we saw that even more when we went into COVID and as we were coming through COVID. And we said, more and more people want to walk, they want to bike. And so in doing that, we know that there are hundreds of people coming through the city, now probably several hundreds coming through the city that hadn't been here before. We have businesses that are here, and we have this green space that we initially thought we were going to make much of that a parking structure. But now we're going to have a parking structure on the other side of the street. So now that we'll have a parking structure on the east side, we just said this is the opportunity to take this park, invest money into this park. And so the name of the park right now is So High, south of Hyattsville. It was a take. I can't take any credit for that. It was creative. It was a take off of New York, the Soho district. But that group came together and said, why don't we do something to activate this park and make it special so that people coming through, will see signage, will see our businesses, will be able to come and experience some of the cultural activities that we have here, come to our breweries, come to our restaurants, and just visit and experience Hyattsville. And oh, by the way, if they don't want to come all the way into Hyattsville, then just enjoy the park itself. We'll have benches and stages and music. So we just thought this was a perfect opportunity to activate the area for visitors and people that want to just use that trail. So, and I think it was about a $700,000 investment total. So we put some expense in it because it will have some parking. And of course, it's ADA compliant, so we wanted to do some things to make sure that we could cover everybody, and it would be a very inclusive park.
Thank you for that perspective. I think it's helpful for us to think about how, this is connectivity, this is economic development, this is tourism. There's so much opportunity. The spot will bring neighbors together as well as newcomers to the area and welcome them. And so I think we're hearing stories about how locally these trails are making change. And I think we've seen it at some of the other developments that have been mentioned as well. But Elliott, I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit more about whether what we're seeing here is par for the course. Do you see it elsewhere? Are there other places or local and regional examples that you would say sound similar to what we're talking about?
Oh, sorry. No problem. Yeah, so again, I work for the Coast Greenway Alliance, which is a sort of a planned, envisioned 3,000-mile multi-use trail from Maine to Florida. Our current route comes down the Anacostia River Trail, from Greenbelt through DC. We have a complementary route that eventually, and certainly working with Bob on this, that will actually cut across to the Met Branch Trail through the Prince George's County Connector Trail, which will be off of the Northwest Branch. So, when I think about trails and my organization thinks about trails, as well as working with the Capital Trails Coalition, we're not just thinking about one little section, we're thinking about how everything connects. We're thinking about people that maybe want to bike and walk for more than an afternoon. They're looking at multiple day trips, or they're looking at a 3,000-mile trip or what have you. But I think what we see here in this region, in this area, is not just in terms of the kind of connectivity with the Trolley Trail and the Anacostia River Trail. That's not just unique in this region. That's not just unique in Maryland. I think that's really unique within the East Coast, and certainly on the East Coast Greenway, it's very unique. But it's even unique for the United States in terms of having this kind of connectivity of trails that serve a multitude of purposes. So for the East Coast Greenway, we have design standards and design guidelines. If you're interested in looking at what that is, go to greenway.org and you can see the sort of 10-foot wide, ADA accessible, and then all the kind of design. It's a 80-page document, so it's a lot more than I can just explain in a minute or two. But really, trails aren't two-dimensional, right? Like, we can talk about design standards and what it might look like on paper all day, but really, trails are kind of a living, breathing entity within our lives, and they're 3- and 4-dimensional. And so what you see on the Anacostia River Trail and the Trolley Trail in terms of, people not just using it for transportation or getting their kids to school or walking to the store to get something to eat or walking to a restaurant, but they're using it to sit and contemplate. They're using it to fish. They're using it to spend time, with their families in nature. I mean, that is a unique that's a unique thing, again, across the United States in terms of the connectivity. I guess there's one part of this loop that is the Lake Artemisia and the Paint Branch Trail, but really the kind of loop you can do on the Trolley Trail and the Anacostia Trail is incredibly unique. And so I think extending the Trolley Trail and expanding that network isn't just about, we use transportation dollars for a lot of these things, but obviously it's much more beyond transportation. There's some pamphlets in the back that explain what the East Coast Greenway is, and we have stickers, and we want to make more of those stickers. A couple of them back there, it's like I bike or I walk, and then there's one person pushing a child or a buggy or what have you. But we want to really make stickers that say like I fish the East Coast Greenway, or just having somebody sitting, on a park bench, because really these are linear parks. They're not just throughways. They are destinations in and of themselves, and so I think we make the transportation argument a lot. We make the argument a lot in terms of connecting communities, but again, the way people live their day-to-day lives and the way they use these trails, it's not simply about passing through. It's really about those trails as destinations. And again, sometimes that's about visiting a business or visiting a cultural institution or visiting a government institution to vote or what have you. But sometimes that is just being able to go somewhere, walking, biking, rolling, and appreciating that space and being able to spend time with others. And I think sometimes that gets a bit lost when we sort of talk about trails as just sort of motion places. Really, they are destinations in of themselves in a multitude of different ways.
No, thank you for that. And I think that's, perfect as we start to think about what's possible. So we are here in the Arts District. We're in Maryland's first Arts District. We're in Prince George's County's only Arts District, and we're so proud to be here in the Gateway Arts District. And so, Evan, as we start to think about what this trail can mean for all of our municipalities along the Arts District, for the Arts District in general, Elliott mentions institutions. We know we have so many rich ones along this corridor. We have arts organizations, we have local destinations, we have regional destinations. Can you share with us from Gateway CDC's perspective what some of those opportunities might be, whether it's art, storytelling, events, or other things that you all see?
Sure, Allie. So Gateway CDC's, one of their primary goals since its inception was to highlight the culture and art within the Route 1 corridor here. And this will present a unique opportunity for people for that to be more accessible to more people. Since I lived here, one of the main things that people say when they come to these communities is, wow, I did not know all this was here. I just pass through or I just drive through coming from work or going to the store. But if we are able to extend the Trolley Trail, now you have a reason to stop. And you have the museum here, you have Studio 3807, you have Sisters Tavern, which are cultural sites newer to the area that will attract more tourism and families, because as he spoke to, yes, a trail is more than just transportation. Now you can use it as an actual destination for your friends, family, and also the Gateway CDC is looking for opportunities for environmental sustainability. So we are even talking about a partnership with the forklift community, so we can create spaces or upcycle spaces, because recycle is when you break down something and reuse it for something different. Upcycle is when you don't waste it and you actually use it for something better. So if you have a tattered shirt and you use it to make a dress, hey, that's upcycling. So we want to take old buildings or unused buildings and make them art spaces, and this will create opportunities for artists and other people to recognize the rich culture and art around all of these different municipalities.
Thank you. So I think what we're starting to paint is a bit of a picture of what's possible with a trolley trail extension. We're already seeing and hearing about community cohesion, increased safety, and safety for, yes, people who walk, people who bike, but people of all ages. So from 8 to 80, the notion that it's safer to get around via our trails. We're also hearing about economic development, small business development, community development, placemaking and arts and culture. And so I think I'm going to take this opportunity to ask each of our panelists just to share, as we're considering this new corridor, this linear park, this spine, really, this potential spine that we have, what are some of the opportunities you all are each most excited about here? Let's spend some time in the visionary to see what you really think could be exciting and unique in extending our trail nearly to the DC line. And feel free, whoever would like to start first, feel free.
I'll have the mic, so I'll start. One of the things I'm most excited about is the potential economic opportunities, specifically when it comes to attracting artists to the area, considering this an arts district. However, there's a reason they're called starving artists. And one of the visions for Gateway CDC is to create more homes, affordable homes for artists, so that they can both work and live here, and create affordable studio spaces which they can own or rent. And that is my ultimate vision, so that we can truly be an arts district that represents the education of art, so you can bring your children here and learn about it, and even walking tours where you have art installations all up and down the Trolley Trail. And also the future is augmented reality and virtual reality, because we even are right now, some communities are working with University of Maryland to create like digital virtual representations of historic areas. And so, just imagine walking down a trail with your AR and with your phone, and you're able to see something, see the history right there in front of your eyes. So you have your virtual reality glasses or goggles, even though they're like $4,000 now, but hey, in the future they'll be cheaper, and we can hand out pairs and give you walking tours. So in fact, hey, maybe you can even see the trolley trail right in front, like the old trolley in front of you as you walk down. Like, these are the kind of visions we have for the future.
I think you said it very well, and I think it all boils down to access, and access to not only our businesses but absolutely art. You know what, I guess I would sum it up to say maybe inclusivity, because if we have QR codes out there on our signs and people know what's in each of our communities as they're walking and riding up and down the trail. They may be driving little scooters or something, I don't know. But as they're coming up and down the trails, it's an opportunity to learn, to educate yourselves, and to just see what's happening here in our communities. And I love the future is just access, easier access to a lot of the great things that we have to offer up and down our corridor.
One of the things that I want to start to see happen, and I've talked to Megan about this, is we've got a lot of connected trail. We're still working on a few gaps and some extensions, but we have a lot already. And we need to be marketing that because it's a pretty unique thing in this region. There's some other great trails in the region, but they all don't offer the sense of connecting a lot of different places and having these combinations of natural areas combined with going through downtowns and going into arts districts and seeing and meeting people in communities that have gone through their ups and downs and struggles, but are figuring how to live in this America and keep ourselves going. And I think we need to market this. We need to invite people in our whole region to come and visit and enjoy the experience, and we need to invite people in the Mid-Atlantic. And we need to focus on that before the East Coast Greenway gets done and forces us to focus on it, because it's going to be a 3,000-mile trail that's going to bring people to it. You know, it takes forever for these type of trails to happen, but it's amazing. You look at the Appalachian Trail, it's a thing that thousands of people decide they need to do it in their life, in pieces or in their younger days, and do it all and say they've done it. It's a thing, and all kinds of people experience it in pieces. My kids help take younger kids out through the Quaker Camp system on the Appalachian Trail, and that can all happen because the trail's there. And the East Coast Greenway's gonna be there. It's evolving and coming fast. And we have some of the best pieces in our area. Maine is pretty good too, but we have some great pieces. And I think that we have the partners that we need to do that kind of marketing and reaching out and really inviting people to come. I have to just tell this story because a couple of years ago, I was at Bladensburg Waterfront Park, and it was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and it was a gorgeous day. You know how we keep getting those overly warm days when we're not supposed to have them. And I was just leaving the park, having talked to the staff. I was on my bike, and like 6 women came by in their biking gear, and they were on their road bikes. And they just came trucking up from the district through Bladensburg Waterfront Park. And it was like midday. I was there doing work. And it was like before Thanksgiving. And I was like, where did these 6 middle-aged white women come from? And I got on my bike. I'm like, maybe I can catch them. So I took off, you know, over the bridge and up through Cottage City and Colmar Manor, and I was having a hard time catching them. And I tried to talk to the last one in line, you know, where are you from? Oh, we're from Shirlington. I was like, Shirlington? That's in Virginia? That's like down the southern part of Arlington County? And I was like, well, how did you get here? And eventually I barely caught up with them because when they got up the Northeast Branch Trail to Riverdale Road, they all kind of slowed down, and their leader was leaving the trail, and she turned left, and they all followed her. And I said, where are you going? Texas 250 barbecue. We've got stuff that people want to come here from all over the region to enjoy, and we got to market it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I get, and Bob's story there kind of illuminates a lot of it, which is that, you know, trails cross jurisdictional boundaries. They cross city boundaries, county boundaries, state boundaries. And, you know, a lot of trail users, you know, they don't necessarily, I mean, a lot of trail users are beginning to understand the difficulty it is to build across those boundaries. But for the most part, if you're using a trail, particularly if you're like, well, I need to get to my eye doctor, or I need to get my kid to school that's maybe across a city boundary but still in county or what have you. Like, they don't necessarily care that boundary is there. They just want to be able to get somewhere safely. right? They want to be able to get to their doctor's appointment, or they want to be able to get to the metro so they can get to work, or they want to be able to get their kids to school. The boundary issue, certainly we as advocates, and certainly understanding with elected officials and city and county staff, regional staff, like we understand the importance of those things. But the day-to-day user experience, like, people just want to get places safely and comfortably. And so what I think is exciting is that whether it's, pat ourselves on the back a little bit, whether it's the Capitol Trails Coalition, sort of helping build that culture of working together across some of those boundaries, even like the Trolley Trail extension, potentially getting the district line. DDOT has been working on, or has certainly lines on some of their future maps. Eastern Avenue, Bladensburg, there's a huge project that's been in planning for a while along Bladensburg Avenue, all the way to the DC line, starting at Maryland, way down basically towards Capitol Hill. So that kind of connectivity that people want, I think, is manifesting in some ways, like with some of these planning processes in ways that maybe a decade ago, or even more recently, were maybe outside of people's imaginations. And I think there is that understanding now, I think maybe more so than, again, a decade ago or 20 years ago, that you build small segments and it really opens up the world for people that live nearby that. And again, maybe that means a 1 or 2 mile section of trail people can have more safe access to their favorite restaurant that's in their neighborhood that's hard to get to, walking and biking and rolling. Or maybe, as we talked about the WB&A earlier, the bridge over the Patuxent connecting those two bits of trail in Anne Arundel and Prince George's is going to be done, knock on wood, wherever, someone knock on wood for me, hopefully done by early 2025. And that opens up a connection from this area towards Annapolis and Baltimore by trail in a way that's, again, like, that's something that you could only imagine of, again, even like a decade ago. So that kind of connectivity, whether it's 1 mile or 50 miles, I would say for trail users, as trail advocates, we want to sort of give importance to all kinds of trail user connections and those distances. Someone who does the entire East Coast Greenway, 3,000 miles, which at this point is about 40% trail and about 60% on-road sort of interim facilities. Sometimes it's no bike lane, sometimes it's an unprotected bike lane, what have you. That someone doing 3,000 miles of the East Coast Greenway, I mean, that's just as important to us as someone that just uses a mile or two of trail to like get to the grocery store, or get their kids to school, or get to the eye doctor. There's really no higher level of importance. Those are all important journeys. And so I think crossing those jurisdictional boundaries and understanding that, again, someone that wants to walk, or God, if they can run this far, run to Annapolis on a weekend day. I mean, that to me is a pretty amazing thing. But again, that 1 little mile of trail that connects to your neighborhood, maybe you just use that to get to your favorite restaurant, to have an anniversary dinner, or to have your child's birthday. And again, to us as trail advocates, to me, like, those are equal weight and importance, right? I'm not going to put more importance on one of those than the other. But those connections that we're trying to make, those are all we need to make sure that when we're arguing for those connections, that all of those things are included, not just sort of one or the other.
Two quick questions. What is the timeline for the build-out for the extension?
So first question is timeline for the build-out for the extension. It's aspirational, but Val, I think you may have to come up here and stand with a microphone as well.
Hi. So we put a proposal into SHA, the State Highway Administration, to do a feasibility study to see if the trail was even feasible. That is currently delayed by federal funding issues, so we're waiting to hear back from them. But once a feasibility study is
So I'm just going to repeat the question. I'm not going to answer it. Who is the organization who's really kind of bringing all of this together around the marketing and the branding of the trail is the question that was asked. Yeah, Eric, come on up. We're just going to keep adding people to the panel now. Come on.
So the development of the trail, which Bob, went through many of, it was amazing to kind of relive that. And I know Bob also appreciated that. Since the development of the trail was, different municipalities, park and planning, like all the different entities, private developers and whatnot, it's not one owner of the trail. Like, there's not one entity. I mean, a park and planning has a piece of it, and College Park has a piece, and Hyattsville. But we've tried to over the years, bring all those entities together. So I know, Maryland Milestones, which, Megan and Valerie work for, they look at heritage tourism in the whole area, so they're a good entity for that. But when Valerie and I worked together at the College Park City University Partnership, when the last segment of the trail, not the last segment, but the connecting trail between Riverdale Park Station and College Park opened, that opened the whole trail up, except this wasn't open yet. And we said, we are going to, when that's open, we're going to do Trolley Trail Day. We're going to bring everybody together, right? And that will help bring all the towns and all the communities and all the different nonprofits together in the business community. And so that, in some ways, that's the entity. It's a loosely organized entity, but it happens annually in June. And hopefully out of that can come a little more organization on that. But that's a great question. I think there are a lot of us who can work together to promote the trail and the communities along it. Yeah. Sorry.
I think there are, and I'd say, along the East Coast Greenway and sort of, along the East Coast, but also other places, I think there are different models of trail management, trail promotion, and I think, for instance, there's a great trail between Richmond and Jamestown called the Virginia Capitol Trail. It connects the current Capitol to the original Capitol or old Capitol. And there is a foundation, the Virginia Capitol Trail Foundation, that essentially works with, it's the only trail in Virginia that is actually, I think, maintained by Virginia DOT. They don't particularly like to manage trails or do maintenance on trails. But the foundation really works on activating the space. They do an annual, sort of similar to Trolley Trail Day event. They're a small staffed organization. I think there's 3 staff, 4 staff. And so there are models, and I'm not making any prescription to, to the communities or cities that are a part of the Trolley Trail that there needs to be a sort of an independent foundation. But there are these models of foundations that specifically focus on trail development and trail maintenance and sort of activating space. That certainly could be a model for the Trolley Trail. But I think there's also other models out there that we see along the East Coast Greenway where it is more of like a coalition of folks that have a standing, whether it's MOUs and other sorts of things to not just do maintenance, but again, on the sort of the activation side and the development side. So I think certainly as with my role with the East Coast Greenway and with Capitol Trails Coalition, I think there's a multitude of examples and sort of certainly happy to have those conversations. And I know folks from CTC are always willing to talk about their communities and how they do things, again, even sort of locally within the region, which might look different or feel different.
And I just wanted to co-sign on that because, for instance, for this extension right here in Hyattsville, we were asked to do several things. We were asked to help with maintenance. We were asked to partner on the lighting. So there were several things where the city had to take some level of responsibility and ownership. So it is more of a collaboration where we all come together and decide how we can get this done.
All right, everybody's got their phones out? HyattsvilleCDC.org, is that right? Yep. HyattsvilleCDC.org.
Or HYCDC.org.
HYCDC.org. All right, we're going to see an uptick in those passports right here. Thank you.
Allie, can I mention another model that
please
made
do.
me think of? I was doing some research on the history of biking in Baltimore, and all along the West Coast, the East Coast, in the last decade of the 1800s was when biking for the first time really started to take off in East Coast cities. And there, with the macho male cyclists, the idea of doing 50-milers and centuries, 100-milers on the weekend became a big thing. And the city cyclists would bike out of the cities, out into the rural areas and around, and various century routes evolved. And it became a big thing to, join League of American Bicyclists or your local bicycle club and be able to brag about how many centuries you did in the last year. the way that they made the centuries authenticated is that taverns and businesses in the rural areas, you had to have your book and stop and get it signed to prove that you did the miles to get there. And so you might have 4 or 5 stops that proved that you did your 100-mile century, and the cyclists would collect their books with all their signatures and turn them in and be validated. So basically, that's a passport. Same idea. So it's a proven thing, and I'm sure that the tavern owners, they probably were like, "Nah, I don't think so." And then just like here at these businesses, of course, they didn't say that right off the bat. But Shortcake Bakery in this business learned, hey, we're getting more business. Where are these people coming from? Oh, it's at Northwest Branch Trail. And so the tavern owners, they got with the program pretty quickly.
Thank you. Yep. Oh, Chelsea.
I'm wondering
Oh, so the question is, as we're looking at this extension, are there types of support? Is that fair? Yeah. Are there types of support that can be offered? Val, you may have to pick that mic up again.
I'm pretty involved in connecting to the different entities. I don't know of anybody who's against this anymore. Everybody's for it. So we don't have a lot of key people that we have to convince or bring on board. I think we're at the time now where the leaders that we have, like the mayors of the towns and the council people and our elected officials and the Park and Planning Commission, we have ubiquitous support and interest. And so we just need to be able to come together and focus on some marketing plans, on some publicity plans, and continue to always work together when we're advocating with the state or the county or the Planning Commission, the sources of funding and help. This last Biden administration set up some awesome programs, and Mount Rainier's got a big grant. The Park and Planning Commission has got a grant to do more trail development. So things may be rough for the next 4 years, but our state of Maryland is still in a very good place in terms of supporting these kinds of activities. There's a lot of pedestrian safety initiative corridors that the state, MDOT and SHA are working on. So I think we just need to kind of really get together and focus. Megan talked about our historic areas in the state. There's a strong historic program that focuses on promoting tourism. So I think we should look there for how to get this story developed and out and into the tourism advertising thing within our own state.
I'll also add that you really need overwhelming community support. Yes, the politicians, if they support it, and the power players, but if you don't have residents buying into this, then it will not work. So I would ask you, hey, tell your neighbors, get them excited about it, because the people here, we appreciate you coming. Unfortunately, you only represent a very tiny percentage of the residents in this area, and we need them to be really on board for this and help, and then we need you to help them see this vision, and that's the only way this will happen.
And I'll definitely agree with Bob in that the Biden administration, through the bipartisan infrastructure law and just even sort of changes at USDOT, I think have primed sort of for more trail infrastructure that we're talking about. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of what happens with some of the funding that is actually programmed through 2026, and there's a transportation reauthorization happening in a couple of years as well. So a lot of sort of cloudy future in terms of some of the funding that we've talked about that's been used both in this region, but just nationally on trails along the East Coast Greenway, et cetera. I would say I'm not a Maryland resident, and so I don't have a delegate or senator to talk to about these issues in Maryland, but if I did have one, I would absolutely be talking to them constantly about the need for not just trails, but just sort of safer roadways and safer crossings and better sidewalks. We have a challenge in most places in the U.S. between right-of-way that's sort of county or city-owned versus state-owned right-of-way, state highways. And some of the most dangerous places are along these sort of state highways as they kind of come through urbanized areas or areas with sort of more population density. And so every state DOT in the country, US DOT, they always say our priority is safety. Our number one priority is safety. But obviously we know that sometimes really what the priority is automotive throughput. We know a lot of people need cars to get around. Transit doesn't get everywhere. Not everyone can walk and bike everywhere. People do need to drive. But obviously safety, if safety is your number one priority, then you're looking at slowing down cars, and you're looking at adding more bike pedestrian facilities, better crosswalks, more crosswalks where they're needed, not just not just haphazard. So I would say that's something to think about moving forward. Is knowing that we've got some maybe clouds on the horizon relative to funding. I think that connection with state government, with SHA, talking to delegates and senators is going to become even more important. And I know again, we have Bike Maryland is an organization that's been working. Just kind of reconstituted, and there are other folks that are kind of working on these issues at the state level in Annapolis. So I would say that's the micro is absolutely important in terms of talking to neighbors, and I also think that bigger picture, making sure that your voices are heard in Annapolis, that you want increased. There's great bikeways and funding programs at the state level in Maryland, but let's get more of that, right? Like let's get a bigger piece of that pie. And I know there's a budget crisis. I'm not going to pretend that there aren't issues, but I do think that going to Annapolis and making arguments to your elected officials is incredibly important. And there is a day once a year where a lot of the sort of bike ped trail advocates meet up, hosted by Bike Maryland and the Anne Arundel County bike folks. So if folks are interested in that, talk to me afterwards and I can sort of connect y'all.
Yeah, and I think the only thing, so thank you all for those. The only thing I'd add is, this is an arts district. We know that art is a way to connect with people, connect people to issues, connect people to places. And so I would just throw out there that I think a great question to be considered is how can art and the arts community be engaged in both an advocacy up and an advocacy out as we're building community around this potential asset. And so I throw that out there into a creative community and hope to see what happens, but I think that's always an area to look as well, is the local resources we have, which are incredible here in the Arts District. How are we doing, Val? Yeah? Do we have more questions, or are we on time? Oh, we're out of time. Thank you all. It's appreciated.
All right. Thank you to our panel. Thank you, Allie, for moderating that good discussion.